Those of us as lawyers are seeing how, in a larger sense, the rule of law is being challenged in ways that many of us never imagined. And the Chicago Council provides an opportunity for people to do something about that.
Its work may not be known to the masses, but many have new rights, new opportunities, and new access because of the work Chicago Appleseed has done.
The Council and Chicago Appleseed are dedicated to rooting out invisible injustices throughout our court system and our justice system more generally.
They provide real evidence-based policy advocacy positions based on real data and research.
It really focuses on the small barriers and obstacles to justice that litigants are facing every day.
There are so many ways in which it is difficult to navigate the justice system, and the Council and Appleseed help serve to bridge that gap.
They shine a light on that Byzantine world of courts that I think is really tough to understand.
Chicago Appleseed has earned the respect of all the stakeholders in the courts. Judges, clerks, and defense attorneys know the impact of our systemic reform work and work with us
to create a real, practical solution to solve a problem that affects the most marginalized groups in our community.
Even just one successful systemic reform initiative can have a sweeping impact.
I find that the Chicago Appleseed Fund for Justice is small, but it is mighty.
As a summer intern, I saw how hard the staff attorneys worked every day to fix some of these barriers to justice that members of our community are facing, and they do so with so little resources that in order to affect real change that they're looking for, they need your help.
The collaboration is faced with a lot of uncertainty in these times, but its work is more vital now than ever.
I think the work of Chicago Appleseed and the collaboration for justice is vital for all Chicagoans if we're going to have a true reform of our justice system.
I hope you'll join me in supporting this very important organization
to advocate for systemic change within our court system, to make that system fairer, more accessible, and more effective for the public that it serves.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for being with us today for the Collaboration for Justice's Improving the Bench panel. Really excited to have you here. I am Mari. I'll be your moderator. I'm an assistant editor at Jewish Currents magazine. Previously spent a lot of time covering political and criminal justice issues in Chicago, including as a reporter on judicial elections at Injustice Watch. And so now I'm going to introduce all of our wonderful panelists that we have today, and maybe you can give a wave when I introduce you. Jen Dean is co-deputy director of Chicago Votes, an organization focused on civic engagement and education for the city's young people. Jen was chosen as an MTV Leader for Change for her activism work and recently received the Barbara Jordan Award for Excellence in Judicial Advocacy and Education from Judicial Accountability PAC. Currently, Jen is working to ensure that there is a more diverse quality judiciary while she continues to build the bridge of criminal justice reform through transformative democracy. And then we also have Stevie Valles, the executive director of Chicago Votes. Stevie grew up in Cincinnati, Ohio, graduated from Oakwood University with a bachelor's in social work. Stevie joined Chicago Votes after working as the national campaigns director for the Alliance for Youth Action, where in 2017, he coordinated a national voter registration day that resulted in over 770,000 new registered voters. Stevie has also worked in the US Senate, the Texas legislature, and on a slew of campaigns ranging from presidential and gubernatorial to affordable housing. And then Malcolm Rich has been executive director of the Chicago Council of Lawyers since 1987 and Chicago Appleseed since its inception in 1997. Malcolm is an expert on a variety of issues, including judicial elections, administrative law, and the accessibility of courts. Malcolm chairs the Executive Directors Council of the Appleseed Network, previously served as the Executive Director of the Foundation for Educational Research, and is of counsel to the law firm Whitted and Tackett LLC, where he specializes in special education and mental health law. And then Elizabeth Monkus is a staff attorney and program manager for Chicago Appleseed and the Chicago Council of Lawyers. Elizabeth joined the Collaboration for Justice in 2010 to manage the Judicial Performance Commission demonstration project and now primarily works on domestic relations and judicial election issues. Prior to joining Chicago Appleseed, she was an appellate attorney and instructor in constitutional law at Governor State University. Rick Tulsky is the co-founder and retired editorial director of Injustice Watch. Rick is a lawyer and reporter whose writing has received more than 24 national awards, including a Pulitzer Prize. He is a longtime board member of the national organization Investigative Reporters and Editors. Most recently, Rick was the founding director of Medill Watchdog, a program at Northwestern University's journalism school undertaking collaborative projects on systemic problems. And then Honorable Travis Richardson is a former judge in the Circuit Court of Cook County, where he regularly presided over felony proceedings, misdemeanor trials, and traffic matters. Currently, he's an attorney at the law offices of Jeffrey M. Leving, representing clients in complex divorce, child custody, child support, and criminal cases. In the past, Richardson was appointed to the Judicial Performance Commission of Cook County, served on the CCBA Judicial Evaluation Committee, and received a Special Chairperson's Award from the NBA Judicial Council. So that's everyone that we have with us today, which is really exciting. And I think we're going to have a great discussion about improving judicial quality and diversity in Cook County and in Illinois. So to kind of get started and kind of give an overview of everyone's work and positions today, we're going to start with our first question, which is, what does a high quality judiciary look like? What do you believe to be the biggest systemic issues making it more difficult for Cook County to have a high quality, diverse judiciary? Briefly discuss what strategies you or your organization are using to address this issue. So to kick things off, I think we'll have Malcolm go first here.
Well, thank you. It's a timely question, obviously. There's more interest today in judges, particularly among young persons, than any time in decades. Been at this for more than 30 years, and I have never seen more interest to try to seek out a diverse and quality bench. And that interest emanates from that particular approach to see fairness and diversity in our courts, in addition to having people smart enough on the bench to understand all the issues. Judges essentially have to be smart, but they have to be sensitive. And to gain the trust of the public, we need a bench which reflects the demographics of our community, race, gender, and sexual orientation. But mixed in with these considerations, and this gets into sort of looking at a little background, is that we just don't have one way for lawyers to get to the bench. So if we're going to have transparency and accountability in our system, each of the ways that lawyers get to the bench must reflect these needs. So we have a whole variety of reforms that are necessary. No matter whether a lawyer is appointed to the bench by the Supreme Court or elected to the bench or by the voters, either countywide or through the sub-circuit system, or they're elected to the bench by the other circuit judges. The system has to strive for quality, diversity, sensitivity, and appreciation that judges are not just umpires, but they're problem solvers, because courts are dealing with social welfare issues today that they never had to do in the past, because as the social welfare network shreds into pieces, the courts have to deal with those issues. But how do you get there? How do you get to that quality and diverse bench? So let's start with the judges that are appointed by the Illinois Supreme Court. Our data show that the Illinois Supreme Court has been improving, both in terms of appointing good judges, but also judges of color. But there's a problem. Our data show that more Black appointed judges lose their subsequent election than white appointed judges, often because they get outspent. So it's not enough to appoint high quality judges of color. We must support their election races. So this is not so dissimilar from judicial elections in general. The public in Illinois want to elect their judges, but they really don't know much about those judges. People have been saying this for 30 years, and I've been involved with judicial elections for all of that time. But something has changed, and that's where the unprecedented interest in judges come into play. In 2018, community organizing and social media helped defeat a judge seeking retention, first time since 1990. And the question is, can the same organizing and social media campaigns be used in the primary to support slates of judges that are found to be smart, fair, and sensitive to equity issues? Can the impact of money in judicial elections be offset to some extent by communication and community organizing? It's worth a try. The other path to the bench is the associate judge process. This is the process through which associate judges are elected by circuit judges after a nominating panel provides a so-called short list of candidates. And there is a very big difference in what's happened over the years in that system. Starting in 2001, the process was used by the court to start electing respected lawyers to the bench, many of whom were of color. For many years, the process was increasing the percentage of the judiciary who were of color at a greater rate than the electoral process, and that includes the sub-circuit elections. But our data show that in recent years, that increase has leveled off. It's not clear why, but the public using the courts must be convinced that this process is transparent and accountable and is dedicated to producing a quality and diverse judiciary. The associate judge process has shown that it has the opportunity to bring a higher quality, more diverse bench. And we have to see to it that that is used in that way. Associate judges are hearing cases every bit as important as circuit judges, and they must be held accountable. The results of those elections could be made public, as are the results of regular voting. And there should be a diverse panel established to draft an amended Supreme Court Rule 39 to memorialize an improved associate judge process rather than relying on an elected chief judge to do the right thing. But then the question is, what can we do to seek an accountable judiciary outside of the elections? I want to raise that just for a minute here. Chicago Votes, which you're going to hear about this, I suspect, from both Stevie and Jen, have begun a community court watching program. And we, Chicago Council of Lawyers and Chicago Appleseed, are very proud to be consultants to this project, which I hope will become a permanent fixture in the judicial accountability landscape. Court watching is a very popular concept, not only here, but around the country. Court watching the Central Bond Court has become a common occurrence. But I see community court watching and related judicial review as a way of doing something about judges identified as having judicial performance issues without waiting for a retention election that has been very ineffectual about removing very bad judges from the bench since its inception. Our program committees of Council and Appleseed are identifying judges who may or may not be poor enough to have no vote on retention, but they're bad enough that people are being discriminated against and harmed in other ways. Community court watchers are members from the non-lawyer community and law students and graduate students and undergraduate students. And I can point out that court watchers are not going to be able to say the quality of a particular decision or whether they're even issued timely, but they can observe how people are being treated and how a courtroom is run. And they can identify lawyers and other persons in the courtroom who can then be surveyed by us to see if there are generally perceived problems with that judge. And then we work with Council, Appleseed, and the Chicago Votes group, puts together a performance improvement plan or a kudos list of judges who are good, and make sure that that gets distributed to the presiding judges, the supervising judges, and the chief judge, and ultimately to the public. The people are demanding that the judicial branch of government do their job in an exemplary manner, which includes being fair to everybody. The community can do more than just demand it. I think we can do something about it, and I think that's starting today.
Thanks, Malcolm. Elizabeth, also from Chicago Appleseed, do you want to follow up?
Thank you. So when people think about judges and courts, they tend to think about crime. But if you've been married or divorced, if you've rented an apartment or walked across an icy sidewalk in front of a business, you are in the realm of what judges rule on every single day. We have 391 judges in Cook County across Chicago and 5 suburban courthouses. Only 39 of them are presiding over solely criminal dockets. The rest are in other courts: divorce court, eviction court, personal injury. And the last survey that we did showed that about 126, 130 of them, 1/3, were prosecutors. So much of our judiciary used to be prosecutors, but so few of our judges hear solely criminal cases The system is not bringing the right people to the bench. Injustice in the courts reaches well beyond who is jailed. It includes how tenants are treated, how parents are treated, how anyone who needs the protection or the intervention of the court is treated. How can we ensure the fairness of outcome for anyone when our judges come from a culture of prosecution, not of resolution? So when we talk about improving our bench, we need to look everywhere touched by our courts. Reforms often focus on judicial elections, but the political process of filling the bench is only part of the picture. To build a diverse and qualified bench, law schools need to graduate diverse students with specific education about presiding over cases, not just litigating them. Law firms need to recruit and promote diverse attorneys. This is more than just racially diverse. This isn't just African Americans and women. It's partners from non-elite law schools. We need attorneys who did more with their life than go to college, law school, and maybe have a clerkship. We also need, therefore, to improve how judges are trained once they get to the bench. What ongoing education do they actually receive? What onboarding education do they actually receive? And it's not just about law. It's bias training, education about discredited social narratives, such as welfare queens and deadbeat dads. They need interdisciplinary knowledge about concepts like compassion fatigue. And we need to improve how judges are assigned to their individual dockets once they become judges and work as a judge. We need to improve how we evaluate them and what's necessary for a judge to earn retention. My focus at Chicago Appleseed has been on the evaluation of judges, both in conjunction with the retention elections and not. And one thing that I have learned more than anything else is that the judiciary is our government. It must reflect our communities and it must be accountable to them. That's all I have to add. Thanks.
Thank you. Great. Stevie, do you want to go next?
Yes, thanks for having me. For me, I believe that a high quality judiciary would focus on preventing prisons and jails from being overcrowded and would prioritize people over the habit patterns of punishment. I also think that the approach would be more holistic and judges would intuitively take into account the consequences of their decisions, not only on the people who appear before them in court, but also on the communities that they come from, the families that they're a part of, the children that they're raising, the siblings that they have, and the trauma that inflicts on generations of people as a result. I also think a high quality judiciary would understand as a matter of priority how racist the judicial system has been in the past and continues to be, and focuses on making amends for past harms as well as preventing any additional harms that are racist in their nature. One of the biggest systemic issues, I believe, in Cook County that is making it hard for us to have a high quality judiciary is the militant nature of our police force. There is an ridiculous amount of funding going towards police as being the number one or initial point of contact for communities. And as a result, there are far too many people going in front of judges who need access to community resources in order to have a better life. I think cutting down on the number of cases that is put in front of judges will give judges the capacity to think of people as people first when they come before them in the court, as opposed to just another case. I also think that cutting down the number of people that go towards or go in front of judges will make it easier for us as voters to hold judges accountable. It's a very confusing process. As Malcolm mentioned, Chicago Votes is doing community court watching, but it's not easy to find the courtrooms that the judges that we want to see are in, to, especially in the age of a pandemic, to see who is actually being put in front of the judge. It's hard to get the cameras cut on so we can see what the proceedings look like in the courtroom. And that is harmful to society and democracy as a whole. We at Chicago Votes, I'm not going to speak too much about what we're doing as it pertains to judicial quality, because Jen is the expert on our staff and I want to leave that to her. But we are changing laws that make it so police can't arrest people for things that people shouldn't be arrested for. In addition to these community court watching sessions that we're doing, we're also just making sure that people understand the judicial process. So we have community members that recognize that what is happening in the judiciary is a matter of civics, and it is their civic responsibility to pay attention and to advocate for reform. So we're educating and empowering community members to hold judges accountable and hopefully be the reform that we want to see.
Thank you. And Jen, do you want to follow up a bit on Chicago Votes work there?
Yes, thank you, Stevie, for introducing all of our work for me. It's hard to follow up after you guys, but for the most part, there are three things that we can really do as a community to envision or imagine a court system that is just. And first and foremost, we have to accept that prison and jail is just simply a bad and ineffective way to deal with crime. Our background is in the criminal justice space, so I can't speak too much to civil court, but as far as criminal court, prison is not a solution to anything. We need to raise our expectations as a community for what judges are and what their role is. And what I mean by that is making sure that we advocate for the prosecution of officers who do commit crimes, officers who lie on their jobs. That would restore faith in our community. Making sure that judges understand that racialized gender violence and state-sanctioned violence are integrated tightly, and understanding training that is available to really understand that. And so Chicago Votes, for example, is submitted a bill this year, the Judicial Equality Act Sb 3573, which essentially requires quarterly training for judges on racial bias, gender bias, and the impact of trauma on youth brain development. We see people all this time in Stateville Prison with long to life sentences who were convicted at 17, 18, 19, 20 years old, who are completely different men at age 60. And so we need to understand the impact that childhood brain development has on sentencing and how judges are looking at young people going through the system. We also need to come to an understanding as a community, including judges, that torturing people is not okay in the name of public safety. When you send people to prison after a conviction, that is torture, and that is not an acceptable form of public safety. And court watching. So as a community, a lot of people don't know that you can go in and watch courtrooms. You are allowed to do that. We need to start getting involved in supporting our community members who are going through court so they are not alone, and making sure that we do have eyes on the courtroom, like Stevie was mentioning. We are currently doing that virtually, but there are a ton of hiccups with that, with technology, and making sure that we can actually see what's going on inside of courtrooms during COVID. And then second, a big thing that we can do is review and be very critical with judges on evaluations. So Denmark has one of the strongest judicial systems in the world. And one thing that they do is they make sure that they are showing the public evaluations of judges, and they are judging them very harshly. That it's not everybody just gets a yes vote. Everybody is looked at individually, and we need to start doing that as well. We also need to reduce punitive impulses in courtrooms while prioritizing healing, repair, and accountability, which we have all talked on. Malcolm taught me this idea of looking at judges and courtrooms as a safety net and not necessarily something reactive that's punishing. So making sure that we understand that jail and prison is not a place to go if you are dealing with mental health issues. Most of the people in and out of the courtrooms are dealing with mental health in some way. And unfortunately, when people do end up in prison or jail, it just makes it that much worse. For example, Tiffany Rusher, who was at Logan Correctional, she was identified as being schizophrenic throughout her whole life on the outside. The judge convicted her anyway and was put on crisis watch. When you are in prison on crisis watch, that means that you are essentially naked in a cell with a thin piece of paper around you with the lights on for 24 hours a day. She was in this environment for 8 months naked in a cell. And that is what happens when judges convict people who have mental health problems. They don't get help. It makes it worse. We can barely handle our mental health crisis on the outside. It's definitely not happening on the inside. And so until we start dealing with that as a community on the outside, I think that that needs to be a huge part of our criminal justice system. Judges have the ability to catch everybody who is going through their worst situations, and they have the ability to make sure that we have community advocates on the inside who are following up with people later on. Our criminal justice system punishes survivors for coming forward. I have yet to find a friend that has come forward with some sort of trauma and actually received justice through our criminal system. It just doesn't happen. So until we come to the realization as a community and what it means to treat people as human beings, that is where our criminal justice system reform should lie, is overall understanding humanity and what happens when you do convict people.
Okay, thank you so much. Rick, do you want to go next?
Sure. So I come at this from a slightly different place. Let me just say that this summer I was struck by the fact that hundreds of thousands of people across America took the streets because they want a more just society, that people are starting to demand justice. But almost all of the focus to date has been on police reform and how to do better policing. And that certainly, I'm not understating how important that is. That's absolutely important. But that's only the first piece of a problem in the criminal justice system. And what I believe is we need to do better at every piece. And so much of what happens and how people think they get fairness or not depends on when they walk into a courtroom and when they walk out, will they feel their dispute, their criminal case, whatever it is, was dealt with fairly and appropriately, whether they won or lost. And how do we help make that happen? There are about 400 judges in Cook County, and we can debate or not whether it's good to have it as an elective system, but where I come from is if we're going to have an elective system, people need to know more about who they're voting for. My mother was a lifelong Cook County resident, And when she would go into the polling place, she had no clue who to vote for. She may have studied the Bar Association ratings, but really what she did was she walked in and looked for women's names and Jewish names and would click those and then walk out and feel like she had done her job. And that is how different people had their own, what they wanted in the system. And I think that had a lot to do with why the Cook County Judiciary was for a long time white Irish males. That is who had the political power, that is who got on the ballots, and that's who got elected. And so where I come from is, if we're going to have an elective system, people need to know way more about who the judges are and how they perform. From 1990 until 2018, not a single judge who stood for attention in Cook County lost. That is not because they were all worthy of being retained. It's because people didn't know, and the judges and the political parties tell people to vote to retain everyone. And so everyone always got retained no matter how good or bad they were. As a result of all that, Injustice Watch began trying to just assemble information, not to tell people who to vote for or who not to vote for, but just to give people information, and then working with groups like Appleseed and Chicago Votes, that information could be harnessed to help people be better informed about who the good and bad judges were. The bar associations there are 13 bars, which to my mind is part of the problem, because if you have 13 different bars coming up with 13 different ratings, it becomes a lot of noise, and people, if everybody gets 5 bar associations to say they're good, what does that mean? And there are some bars that actually do narratives that are more helpful. The Chicago Bar Association, the Illinois State Bar Association, and the Chicago Council of Lawyers being 3. There's still the problem, though, inherently, that nobody's going into the record, or not very deep into it, and trying to study what's beyond what lawyers say about what goes on in the courthouse and what the headlines say. I think the Chicago Council of Lawyers does the best job at being independent and not being bullied by the judges into saying everybody's good, but they don't have the basic information. And part of that is because the voters of Cook County and the state of Illinois have never demanded that our records be open the way they are in other states. And part of that, so that you can't go and look up readily which judge disposes of a lot of cases and which judge doesn't. Which judge does the most? Are there judges who favor white defendants, who treat white defendants differently than black defendants? There are things in the records that could be studied that haven't been. And so Injustice Watch has been pushing to do that, but it's also, Injustice Watch now does a guide every 2 years that is based on not telling people who to vote for, but telling people what we find as an army of interns and fellows and staff members goes through the records and assembles things. So that, let it be noted, in 2018, a judge named Matthew Coughlin became the first judge not to win a retention race. And there's somebody in this group of people who actually did the reporting, who found the flaws in Matthew Coughlin, that Injustice Watch is proud of Mari's work in doing the exposing. And then several people on this call then took the data that we found and used it to show how this judge had flaws that probably didn't merit another 6 years on the bench. So, you know, I think we need more of that. I think it has to be what Injustice Watch does is we look at who gets reversed the most. We look at who sentences the most harshly and things that are available. I'd love there to be more data available, and I'd love for Injustice Watch to continue pushing to get those things open. But there is a movement, and as Malcolm said, more and more people are paying attention to this. And Chicago Votes, you guys get so much credit in helping raise awareness on why it matters. And I'll stop right there.
Thank you so much. And we'll add that Rick and I did a lot of the reporting on Matthew Coughlin together, so he deserves some of the credit too. Travis, are you with us? I don't know if Travis, are you muted? Okay, I think he stepped away, so we'll get back to him soon. Would love to hear about his own experience actually running for judge. But, you know, in the meantime, I want to delve a little bit into a lot of the topics that were covered here, which I think is a great overview. But when it comes to actually, you know, supporting candidates, high quality candidates who are running for judge, given this kind of complicated system that, you know, involves a huge list of names at the ballot box, and some judges perhaps who are more well-funded than others, or who have, you know, names that are more suited to, you know, being checked off by voters, as well as kind of this recurring problem that Malcolm discussed, which is that, you know, well-qualified Supreme Court appointees of color are often appointed and then tend to lose their seats at the election. So, you know, what are some actual strategies that can be used to raise awareness, to support these kinds of candidates, perhaps even if they don't have, you know, a certain amount of money that they're able to pour into the race. And so maybe either Stevie or Jen, I don't know if one of you want to talk a little bit about what Chicago Votes does around the elections in this area.
I can start, Jen, if you would like. So for the past few years, we've been putting out a judicial voter guide, which compiles the data that is gathered around judicial quality. And we put it in a kind of aesthetically pleasing as we can possibly make it form in line with how it's going to show up on people's ballots. That way, when people go to cast their ballot, they have a full list of all the judicial candidates and a assessment of their quality that is in line with how those candidates show up on the ballot. So when they're voting, they can vote confidently. There's so many judges on the ballot, and researching these judges is very difficult. So we just try to provide this for folks so they can feel a little confident when they go into the polling booth.
Another thing that we ensure we do is train our organizers to understand how judges are elected and to ensure that our organizers are talking about that in the field. Specifically, we work in Cook County Jail to register voters and also make sure that elections run smooth with the Chicago Board of Elections and the Sheriff's Department. And one of the biggest incentives for folks to register to vote in Cook County Jail was the understanding they can vote for or against judges, sometimes judges who are their own. So that is also really important and critical to our work, is to ensure that the people who are most impacted by judges are the ones who are getting the most education and the most outreach from us to vote for or against them.
And I would add to that, one of the more interesting aspects of elections research especially with regard to get out the vote, is that the most impactful voter education is less about who you should vote for or what issue you should support, and more about the actual practicalities of how to vote, how to register, where to go, what the ballot's going to look like, and what do you check if you want this person not to represent you anymore, so what Chicago Votes does, as well as the other judicial elections groups out there with their ballot sample ballots, really need to focus on is making people understand how that election line works, what it means to leave it blank, what it means to vote no, what it means to vote yes, and give them the confidence that it really does actually matter whether or not. You may recall, you probably don't, this is kind of a geeky thing, but a couple years ago, we had a judge standing for retention who was actually facing trial for misdemeanor assault at the same time. And she won her retention election with her required percentage of yes votes, but very few voters had bothered to vote. So her 60% yes for retention really reflected about 30% of the ballots cast. And I think if more people understood how that retention vote worked, they'd skip a lot fewer of the judges.
And Elizabeth, I do want to follow up with you because you were talking a little bit about the importance of equality judiciary beyond just the criminal justice aspect of it, which of course is extremely important, but is only one small portion of the judges on the bench. And oftentimes I think voter outreach, education, and speaking as someone who has been a voter myself, people perhaps are a little bit more familiar with criminal justice reform aspects of this, and they might have a sense of, okay, I want to vote for a public defender, or I'm not going to vote for somebody who's been in charge of wrongful convictions in the past, but they might not know as well how to evaluate other judges, or they might not have as much interest in areas of, judicial expertise or diversity beyond those that they can understand within a criminal justice framework. So I'm curious if you have any thoughts on ways to better support judges support judges and get out the word about judges on the ballot beyond these criminal justice frameworks.
Wow, that is a really great question. And I wish I had a simple answer to it. But I think, again, it comes back to this voter education model, that less than 10% of the people you bring to the bench are going to have any impact on criminal justice issues at all, which means we need to be looking at judges who have people for judge, who have a much more interdisciplinary understanding of what the law means. Like Malcolm brought up about how courts are now our social safety network, what Jen brought up about how so many people in courts are in crisis, and that's not just true in the criminal courts. That's very true in the domestic relations courts. That's very true in the elder courts. So we need to be looking at judges who, again, to go back to that point that I made, we need to be bringing in attorneys who are not from elite law schools, who perhaps did more with their life than go to college and law school. We need to be bringing in judges who understand how the law fits into society as a whole, with this understanding that courts play more of a role than just enforcing the law. They are helping people through crisis. They are helping folks resolve family issues. They're helping folks, they're helping people get around bad life choices. It's very dense, it's very complex. And I think it comes back to changing legal education at the law school level, as well as changing our notion of what judges need to learn before they're actually given a docket. I'll stop there and someone else can jump in, or we can move on.
Sure.
Let me add one more thing
Oh, yeah.
about looking at the civil side of the ledger, and that's where I think community court watching can actually, if once it's open, going at a larger with a larger scope, that's where non-criminal justice division judges can be brought into play here, so that when we go to our program committees and say what judges are really problematic, the criminal justice groups clearly have their own poster children, but on civil side, whether it be domestic relations or probate or eviction, they also have their judges, and we need to focus on those judges as well. It's not as clear cut because we don't have sentencing data, for example, to make it a little bit clearer, and we don't have some of the appellate court decisions that can make it clearer whether somebody is a good judge or not. But it is, as Elizabeth said, it is just as important, but we can identify some of the judges based on what the lawyers are saying that are in the civil side, and provide community court watching, and provide not necessarily non-retention election evaluations, so that those judges get put on the radar screen and something can be done about those.
So let me add to that, Malcolm, because you and Elizabeth are right. We need a better quality of judges, and we need ways for community groups to watch and know more about the civil, but it also comes back to the data. Imagine if in Illinois and Cook County, we could look up which judges in eviction court ruled most often for tenants and which ruled most often for homeowners. If we could look at, in the civil side, who favors plaintiffs all the time, who favors defendants all the time? Are there some judges who seem to favor certain attorneys? These are kind of things that right now are so opaque because Illinois is way behind in making records available. And I'm of the hope that a lot of groups are successful in getting things more open. But data could exist to help us better evaluate how the judges are performing. We just don't have good access.
That's I just want to point out that's where the clerk's race, the circuit court clerk's race is so important. It's so ignored generally. That's why, it's important to look at the clerk's race, make sure the person who wins is held accountable, just like any judge, because as Rick and Elizabeth pointed out, we really have to have the data both on the civil and the criminal side if we're really going to really look at our justice system in a way that will be where we can actually reform it.
To that point about data, there are several models, but there's a huge body of research into how to best evaluate judicial performance. And the models that continually rise to the top, in addition to looking at appellate records and looking at dates to resolution of cases, one of the things the really successful models do is they talk to more than attorneys. They talk to litigants. They talk to courtroom staff. They talk to, if there's a child's representative who is continually appointed to cases to act as a child rep in a case, they talk to them. Here in Cook County, for the most part, the people who are doing the evaluations are only talking to attorneys. And I was an attorney for many years, and most of my friends, thankfully, were not. And I know that when I talk to them about judges and courts and how it works, I frequently get checked because I'm like, oh, yes, I'm talking about the judge this way, and I'm talking about this court process this way, and I don't realize how stupid that is, or how unfair that is, or what a sick system I'm defending without even knowing that I'm defending it. So data goes just beyond raw numbers. Judicial evaluation requires us to talk to everybody who's in that courtroom to find out whether or not the process is serving them.
Great. Thank you, everyone. And we have Travis back now, which is awesome. Travis, we were talking a little bit about how to support higher quality candidates running to fill judicial vacancies, including those who were appointed by the Supreme Court and previously served well as judges. And so I want to make sure to get your thoughts on this because you have yourself run for judge. And then also if there's anything else that you would have wanted to say to the intro question that you didn't get a chance to, feel free to add.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. I'm sorry I had to blank out and go handle an emergency very quickly. Such is the life of private practice. But let me just add a few things. One, if you want good judges, you're going to have to work for them. It doesn't get any simpler than that. And that means going against sometimes the convention that a female judge is going to be nicer or give my son or my child a better break. Therefore, I'm going to vote for the young lady who's running for judge rather than the guy. And then you find out the young lady that you supported is the granddaughter of a dragon from the era of King Arthur's and is quite stringent when it comes to rulings regarding the defendants. So you're going to have to do your research, find out who's really deserves to be on that bench, and then you're going to have to basically fight for them. I think that the West Side Justice Center has done a remarkable job in this respect. Kudos to them. But it's almost like they are, that lone Dutch boy with his finger in the dike. And there's lots of more dikes and there are lots more leaks, and they only have so many fingers. But they've been a leader in this regard. And you can't imagine just how crucial this is. I think I may be, unless I missed it, the only one who's actually worn the robe on the panel. Let me tell you, we're in big trouble. We're in big trouble. It's even worse than I thought when I was on the other side as an attorney. It's worse. It's worse than you can imagine. Malcolm, you've been doing this 30 years, and we've had scores of conversations. But I could sit you down and tell your stories now, and it would be as though you're hearing it for the first time. It's really that bad because the public doesn't understand how important it is. So they'll elect someone based on a gender or a name or ethnic background, and they have no idea the harm that they are causing in so doing. Now, some people say like Jefferson, a better or bad democracy than no democracy at all. Well, I've been around long enough to say that adage has some flaws. That adage has some flaws because if the outcome of your democratic process is absurd, you're gonna have a real problem. And the public should be outraged by some of the things that are going on. The only way the public is going to be outraged, however, is if they are educated about what is going on. For example, at 26th Street, your average defendant is young and Black or brown and male, but not your average judge, not even in the system. So you have a situation where African American and Latino men are overrepresented as litigants, but underrepresented in the road in those who are making the decisions. Just visually, that is a remarkable problem. And if we saw something like this in South Africa in the 80s, all of us will be outraged and screaming how unfair it is. But it happens every day in Cook County, and we turn a blind eye. And when I say we, I mean everybody from the young and Stevie and Jen's generation, all the way up to Rick and Malcolm's. Everybody's guilty. Everybody, including myself, for allowing it to happen and not stopping it. We have to realize, in terms of when we're choosing our judges, that race does matter. It's not the end all be all, because I'd much rather have Earl Warren over Clarence Thomas, but it is some indication of the fairness of the system if everybody in the populace is being represented in the role. So if it would be unacceptable to most white folks in Cook County for 90% of the judges to be Black and Latino because of an imbalance and it's not fair, doesn't share the power of the role, why then is it okay for 90% of those in the role to be white? These are questions that need to be asked and answered. I think I heard someone mention the issue of the insensitivity of judges sending people away for long sentences. It's remarkable to me that we don't have a requirement that judges who sit in criminal court, it's remarkable that there's no requirement for them to tour their jail and their prison at least once a year. You should know where you're sending people. You should see what it's like. I myself volunteered to tour Cook County some years ago. I actually won an auction at an event and got a tour by the sheriff, Tom Dart. The feds have no idea what's going on over there when they're not watching. No idea. I have friends who are sheriffs and who work for the county. There'll be like outbreaks of certain diseases and ailments, and they just cover it up because they don't want to have to deal with the problem. There are areas of the prison that are completely kind of marked off because they act as the mental health facility for the county by and large. And you're not allowed to go in there unless you're completely covered in some kind of protective gear, because the detainees are just so out of their minds. And they're not getting any better being locked up 24 hours a day. So we're, locking people up rather than treating them. I think judges I think it should be mandatory. And again, this is coming from a perspective of someone who's worn the role. There should be mandatory therapy sessions for judges. You need to be able to release some of what's balled up inside of you when you sit on that bench all day, particularly in criminal court, and you're sending people to jail, you're deciding their fates. You're giving people like 60 years, knowing that a 35-year-old man with a 60-year sentence is very likely never going to walk free again. That does something to you on the inside. It does something to you in traffic court. When you hear someone cry, Judge, I can't afford to pay those fines to get my license back. Without my license, I can't drive to my job, which I'm going to lose if you don't have. It does something to you. So I think that judges should be required to have therapy, have someone that they can talk to, and not just another colleague who's going to say, I've been doing this for 20 years, you'll get over it. That's not a solution. They need to, the judges with anger issues need to be identified and removed. I think every year, every judge should go through racial, gender, and LGBT sensitivity training. Every single one, every year. every single one, every year. You hold such power with that robe. And people with power, it's human nature, tend to abuse it. So there should be some sensitivity training regarding that. If you go to the 4th floor at the Daly Center, for example, and I had a judge actually say this to me. She's now retired. Back in 1996, when I was prosecutor in traffic court, she walked in and looked out at her courtroom. Remember the red brick building that's now a fancy schmancy dining place? She looked at the defendants. All the defendants were Black and Latino. She looked over at the cops. They were all white. And she looked at me and she said, well, I guess white folks don't drive in the city of Chicago. This is the kind of systemic thing that goes on every day and no one says anything. There's no outrage. So if you're dealing with that, I think there should be some sensitivity by the court so that you don't become a robot and just tell someone, well, you know, you were stopped. I believe the officer, that's going to be $100 fine. Because officers lie just like everyone else. And let me close with saying this. Tim Evans was one of the best bosses I ever had. Nicest guy in the world. He's a politician, remember? He was an alderman for many, many years. But that associate process is just as flawed as the electoral process. Probably more so. The last associate class, every single Latino was ignored. Not one Latino was elected. Not one. In Cook County. We're not in Utah, we're not in Idaho. This is Cook County. Where was the outrage? The same emotion and outrage that we saw in the streets a couple of months ago should have been the same outrage that we saw after that happened. People should have been in a Daily Plaza with signs, all of them in Spanish, asking the judges in Cook County why they couldn't find one Latino candidate to add to their group. I guess they're just not good enough. Ironically, the class before that, not one African American was elected, at least the first time around. And for the first time in history, there was a quote unquote tie for the last spot. Now, if you believe that, I've got several bridges all around Chicago River I like to sell you at a discount price. I tend to believe that there was some corrective measure made because no African American was in that class, and there was some concern about the reaction. Okay, so they made it a tie and had a runoff. Now, here's what's funny, because they destroyed the ballots. Don't bother looking into it. They destroyed the ballots. But here's what's interesting. Remember that outrage I talked about that should have been there when no Latino was elected? The same outrage should have been there when no African American was elected. People should have been in Daily Plaza screaming. Okay? But when there was no reaction and there was only a tepid response, that sent a message. That's why they said, okay, we'll do it to the Latinos this time. If no one's going to hold them accountable, why not abuse the power? Why not be racist? It's fun. We get more people who look like us. We get more prosecutors than anything else. So understand what's going on here. And we need the Jens, the Stevies, the Malcolms the Elizabeth, we need you really to step on the accelerator. We really need you to push and push hard and be intrepid and strong and look the powers that be in the eye and tell them, this is the line we're drawing here and no further. You need to have the same kind of, I guess, emotional energy from the captain in Moby Dick, who was just so emotionally caught up in trying to catch the great beast, that as he rode the great beast to the bottom of the ocean, so great was his anger that if his chest was a cannon, he would have shot his heart upon his hide. With apologies to Melville for just snatching his words. That's how I feel about this, because I've seen it up close. There were some who actually were quite happy when I lost my election by maybe 1.5 percentage points, because of the things that I was doing and saying and talking about. When the police would bring in one of their rookie classes from the academy, and I talked to them about what it meant to be an officer and how to treat people and how to be honest and not make up stuff and not go along to get along. Or when I would tell my colleagues that I don't think that everybody who comes into traffic court is guilty. We're not a bill collection agency. I'm not just going to take money from people because that's what, quote unquote, they want us to do. We actually had at one point the sheriff's department come speak to the judges. They needed more slaves. And I say that with the strength and conviction that the scriptures are written in. They needed more slaves. They actually told us we're short people for cleanups around the county. We are asking you to sentence more people to what? Swap. If you can avoid giving them fines, give them swap. We need to get some more areas of the county clean, so we need more people. In other words, we need some more slaves to do this work. This is the kind of thing that happens. It should have been on the front page of the newspaper. In other words, judges, don't follow your own discretion. Do us a favor and give us some free workers. Can you imagine? But it's a hell of a job. They pay you $200 grand. You don't have to work that hard. All of your jokes are funnier. People call you judge and sir and your honor. And who wants to mess that up by doing the right thing? That's what you're fighting against.
Yeah, that's a very powerful and very important statement, and I'm going to follow it up with something really kind of milquetoast and wishy-washy, but that's the point I was making with we need to be bringing different people to the bench. We need to not just be bringing, somebody who went to that particular law school and had this particular career track through state's attorney with maybe 1 or 2 years in a private law firm. And that's what I'm talking about when I say judges need to have different onboarding education. Like Travis said, how every single judge needs to go into sensitivity training every single year over and over and over again. Well, I would add back to that, they need to be also being educated about what their role actually is. Their role is not actually passing judgment. Their role is resolving problems that people have been unable, civil court judges are there to resolve problems that people have been unable to resolve on their own. You don't come into a contentious divorce because you know who's taking the dog and who's taking the vacuum cleaner. You come into a contentious divorce because, you know, you're in crisis and you need somebody to intervene. And our judges aren't coming into their courtrooms with this notion that they are supposed to be promoting a social good. They come into their courtrooms with this notion that this is their fiefdom. And the flip side of that is sometimes they don't know where they have discretion, and that's not good either. So to follow up Travis's passion with something a little bit less forceful, but I think just as important.
Let me add one more thing, because I think that's sort of a piggyback onto what Elizabeth was saying. Because yes, existing judges sitting on the bench need to have that kind of training. They need to have at race and equity training and race and gender equity training. But we need to be focusing on the primaries as much as we are focusing on the retention election. I know it's great to know that we got rid of one bad judge 2 years ago. And it's great that we're focusing on one of these things when the retention elections to really expose some of the bad judges. But let's start from the beginning, where we're going to try to get people onto the bench who already have that kind of sensitivity. They don't need to necessarily have to have the training once they get to the bench, because they've already had the training and they've already internalized it, and they're coming to the bench without that learning curve. We talk about learning curve about, they need to know subject matter information. Well, learning curve is also about how do you solve problems and how you treat people fairly. And people should have to go on the bench without that learning curve necessary. So I would like to see social media and community organizing be as focused on the primaries and getting good people on the bench to begin with as we do in the retentions.
Great. And just as a quick time check, we've got about 20 minutes left. We've got a couple more things to talk about here, but just wanted to note that for everybody. So the one thing that I often think about, especially as I was covering judges, and given the increased attention to these races now, and many of the political forces involved in Cook County who are less interested in reform of the legal system and the criminal justice system in general. With this kind of increased attention and more voters, perhaps paying attention to their ballot, although obviously there's still a lot of work to be done, there is a possibility that, other groups with different interests will get involved in the process as well. And perhaps judges will, come under scrutiny when it comes to retention elections if they tend to be more lenient or sentencers, or perhaps judges that rule against corporations will come under scrutiny. And so I'm kind of curious about this balance between allowing judicial independence when it comes to elections, while also maintaining judicial accountability, and kind of preventing the other groups from kind of twisting these things into ways that could end up with quality judges leaving the bench. And so I'm curious if anybody has thoughts about that or want to jump in.
So to my mind, one of the dangers of an elective system is that people with an agenda can push things through. So you see, or was it Iowa, where the anti-abortionists went after a state Supreme Court justice because that judge, I don't remember if it was a man or a woman, was pro-choice. And those, what you really want are judges to be independent and apolitical. And an elective system brings out the worst in that. But I think it's hopeful that people actually are trying to get better, fairer, more diverse judges. The fact that there are conversations like this happening, and that people care to hear it, is a step in the right direction, I think.
Yeah, I mean, we have a race downstate with Justice Kilbride. Basically, it's become a referendum on Michael Madigan, with at least $6 million already put into the kitty between the two groups, the Republicans versus the Democrats, and a very well-respected, reform-minded Justice Kilbride, sort of in the middle. And so suddenly the retention election downstate is weaponized by the political parties. And then I think something, Elizabeth's been saying this for 10 years about, that judicial evaluations really need to be based on what those judges are doing on the bench and how they're treating people, and not necessarily how, we're not supposed to open the door to special interest groups to say, well, we don't like a particular judge because the way they ruled. So I think it's really important to keep the elections separate from the political aspect, and it's not easy to do.
Malcolm and Travis also brought up the associate judge process, which is a big way that judges end up on the bench and often is more opaque to the average citizen or voter. And so, if there were a Supreme Court rule that would improve the associate judge process, what might that look like? What could a more just associate judge process look like? Does anyone want to jump in on that?
I personally think that it's somewhat of a crude example, but remember how gifted Whitney Houston used to be before the drugs? When she sang, it really was angelic. She had a gift, and it wasn't man-made. She had a gift from God, and she abused it. Then after the drugs, you heard her sing, and it sounded like someone scratching nails against a chalkboard. I feel the same way about the associate judges process. The judges, circuit court judges, have abused it and have turned into, unfortunately, a group of people who are horse trading and trying to reward their former colleagues who are prosecutors, trying to reward certain, communities who perhaps voted for them to make them circuit court judges. So once you abuse something, you should lose it. And perhaps those associate judgeships should all be circuit court judgeships and throw them back into the electoral pool, or throw them into the electoral pool. Expand the number of people who are elected from sub-circuits if you want. Make them all countywide if you want. But if the judges are going to continue to abuse the process, again, I say it again, and I'm not from Costa Rica or anything. I don't have 1 ounce of Latino blood that I'm aware of. But it is absolutely outrageous that they couldn't find one in the last class. As outrageous as it was that they couldn't find one African American in the class before that. And if the judges are going to play those kinds of games, they should not have access to this vote in the process. If they're going to do that, take it out of their hands. Let the Supremes decide. Because the problem is that the process is completely anonymous. No one knows what the vote tallies are. They destroy the ballots. So there needs to be more transparency. And then maybe we'll see them begin to act right if they know that there could be a problem with people knowing, knowing not necessarily how they voted, but why they voted the way they did, and then what kind of numbers. But it has to be changed because you can't have up and down years. There, as Malcolm said, when this first started off, there was a consistent level of diversity with the associate classes, improving the diversity of the court. But over the last half decade or so, it's turned into this whole game. And certain communities are wasting their time sitting at the table to play the game because it's rigged. Ever play 3-card Monty? Can't win because that ace of spades is never on the table. It's never on the table. I played it. I've seen it played. It's never on the table.
Another thing with the associate judge process is the associate judge process. So in broad strokes, 39 states elect judges and 14 have a gubernatorial appointment with a nominating committee and 11 have a merit selection and just two have a legislative appointment system. Our associate judge process is not an appointment system and it's not an elected system. And it's supposed to be an application, and then you get this sort of peer evaluation, and then you have this sort of peer election. And as Travis has pointed out, it isn't working that way. So a potential way to fix it would be change how the applications come in. Have a broader nominating commission at the front end to bring the applicants in. I haven't researched this, and I'm not sure what would work best. But instead of having individual judges apply to be associate judges, perhaps there should be some sort of community system that finds candidates and presents them, or some sort of peer system that finds candidates and presents them. Because if communities want to see themselves represented and get fired up about making sure the bench looks like them, maybe they should be the people finding judges. I don't know. It's one possibility.
But I think it's really important if you can have a system that actually rewards quality, rewards sensitivity, and rewards diversity, that you're going to get a lot more of that group of people that will continue to apply. So right now, there was a reputation that the associate judge process got in the 2001 to 2010 period, where good people could run for judge without having to pay an electoral fee, essentially run for election. And now, there'll be even up to just 5 or 10 vacancies, you'll have 250, 300 people applying. And there's some very, very good quality lawyers of all colors applying, because there's still this presumption that you have a chance. And to the extent that that's being taken away, you're going to get fewer and fewer of those people that will apply. So I think this is a magic moment, a window of opportunity and I think this is important for the community and community organizers to really push the notion that we need to demand that this associate judge process produces that kind of quality, diverse bench. And that will put pressure on the judges.
Sure. And just before we close, Stevie and Jen, we haven't heard from you in a little bit. So I don't know if there's anything else you want to add around your kind of community court watching process and kind of, any details that you haven't discussed, or other, organizing methods around judicial quality. I want to give you a few minutes for that.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the biggest things that we've seen as an organization is the excitement around judges since 2018. And with that, a lot of the folks who are supporting the Black Lives Matter movement are finally understanding that connection of judges in this work as well. So I'm really excited that our court watching program is launched and that people are understanding how powerful judges are in our system. And that's going to be a permanent program of Chicago Votes. So I'm excited for that. And then also our judicial voter guide is growing. So there's a lot of funding out there to make sure that voters are informed. We used to celebrate that we sent out 40,000 voter guides, but now we're celebrating that we're sending out 1.2 million voter guides. So it's amazing to see the amount of growth and excitement around this work.
And let me just compliment Chicago Votes for really helping to lead the charge on raising the awareness and the need for high quality, diverse bench. And you, I hope you're around for a very long time. We look forward to consulting with you.
Absolutely. And, we could never have done this work without Rick and Malcolm. Rick and Malcolm were the first two people that I sat down with when I was like, I don't understand anything about this judicial system, but I need to know, and so does everybody else. So Injustice Watch and Appleseed are really the two organizations that set us up for success. We would not have been able to do this without you guys.
Great. Well, before we close, we have one question from an audience member that I wanted to read out, just to offer that here. So the question is that the Chicago Council of Lawyers used to file petitions with the Illinois Supreme Court suggesting amendment of the rules for various points, such as merit selection for vacancies. The Supreme Court could order the administrative office to make statistics available of the type Mr. Tulsky suggested so that judicial evaluations would be more meaningful. And Justice Watch, Chicago Votes, and other organizations could join or publicize a petition to increase pressure on the court to implement some or all of such a petition. Are groups willing to work together on such specific efforts for change? That's a question that we got, if anyone wants to respond.
Just to the last part of it, I think that the collaborative spirit in Chicago activists and nonprofits and groups working toward this kind of reform is better than it's ever been. I think people are finding much better common ground or larger common ground. So I think to the very last part of that question, absolutely, I think coalitions could be built around ways to change the judicial selection process or the judicial education process or the judicial onboarding process. As to specific proposals, I'm not sure what's out there right now, so can't speak to that.
But there's room for collaboration and there's room for coordination, and that's the way it's going to have to be if we're really going to change the system. So everybody on the, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, and I think there's definitely hunger for collaboration right now.
And that's one of the reasons why we wanted to do this panel, to air this so that other people will be motivated to work with all of the groups that are represented here, to move forward on trying to change the structure of the court system so there are fewer cases, as Stevie pointed out, and that there are higher quality judges that is defined also in terms not only their understanding of the law, but their understanding of people.
Mm-hmm. Great. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for this illuminating and powerful, important conversation. Really appreciate your time, panelists and audience members. Just going to give the last couple minutes here to Malcolm to talk a little bit more about the Collaboration for Justice program and about Chicago Appleseed.
On behalf of Chicago Appleseed and the Chicago Council of Lawyers, I want to thank our moderators very much and our panelists for their powerful presentations and their solid ideas. But I want to note that this forum is part of a month-long spotlight event, which is taking place in lieu of our annual fundraising luncheon, which we have been doing for many, many decades. So we want, as a collaboration, that's Chicago Appleseed and the Chicago Council of Lawyers, to ask for you to help contribute toward our work. We're a collaboration for justice, which focuses on access to justice, economic justice, and criminal justice. If you want to make a charitable contribution, you go to our website, www.chicagoappleseed.org/donate, or you can go to www.collaborationforjustice.org. And I ask that all of you that are listening consider getting involved, whether with us, Chicago Appleseed and Chicago Council, or with Chicago Votes, or helping out Injustice Watch. So giving some of your time and your expertise. For us, you can go to our website, www.chicagoappleseed.org, and sign up for a monthly newsletter, or you can just email me at caffj@chicagoappleseed.org. And I think you go to the websites for our other organizations represented here to see how you can get involved. And I'd be happy to help triage that because we are all working toward a common goal. But I thank everybody. I thank for all our donors, and I thank for our pro bono lawyers and other professionals. And I particularly thank the work that's going on in this town to try to improve the quality and the diversity of the bench. Thank you.
And if you haven't filled out your ballot yet, I do believe that Injustice Watch and Chicago Votes have their judicial elections guide available. So those are definitely things that you can check out on their websites, justicewatch.org and chicagovotes.org. Is that? Yep. So.
And voteforjudges.org gives you sort of an overview of all the Bar Association ratings and some other information about voting.
Right. So those are 3 websites you can check out to fill out your retention ballot.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.